Well, in this episode, I'm looking forward to continuing what we started to discuss last time, which is talking about my new iPhone and iPad. But Apple also released new Macs since the last episode, so we're going to talk about that as well. I'm your host, Luke Clayton, and this is Must Increase Podcast.
Thanks for joining us for this episode. And before we get started, please take a moment to subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever you may listen to podcasts. If you want to learn more about any guest featured in this episode or access any content or resources discussed, be sure to check out the show notes in the episode description. We hope today's episode increases truth and inspires hope in the lives of your church, your business, your family, and beyond. Welcome to the Must Increase Podcast.
All right, welcome to the podcast. I'm really glad that you have joined me for this episode, and I am looking forward to talking about some kind of picking up once again where we left off last time, and that will be talking about my new iPhone as well as iPad, changing up a little bit of my hardware in that way. And also, I'm going to talk a little bit about something that Apple announced since the last episode. In fact, this past Monday, they held a very short event in the evening to announce new Macs. And it's really not a massive upgrade in terms of it's not a true like new product line or anything like that. It's simple refreshes to products that are already existing. And really, they made a big deal of just the third generation of the Apple made silicon chips, which of course has become the M line of chips. And now they're on the M3. And this is tracking with kind of how they've progressed now. I mean, it's been, I believe they started this transition in 2020. So now it's 2023. So it makes sense that they have announced the M3 and they announced two new or again refreshes, I guess, to two of their product lines, which is going to be the iMac as well as the MacBook Pro. So let's talk quickly about the iMac because there's not much new going on here in terms of anything in terms of like the look or features necessarily. It really is all about the M3. And if you're wondering what we're talking about, I'm showing my screen to you. If you're watching, you're able to see this is the iMac. It's the colorful all-in-one desktop computer. I have seen these in the wild. They are very, very nice in terms of aesthetically. They look really good. Again, the colors are nice. It's a 24-inch screen, a very nice screen. Speakers kind of built in built in there at the bottom as well. But you can see, hey, it's just packed with more juice, as they're calling it there. It's just got that M3 chip. And this is a significant, I guess, somewhat significant upgrade because it's been 2 or 3 years since they last refreshed the iMac. And so they're upgrading from an M1 to an M3. Of course, they're making a big deal about the colors, which again has been available now for a while. Now, it is pretty impressive that it is, again, this isn't new, but it is only a 11.5 millimeter thin casing, and that is very thin. That's just over a centimeter. So, less than a half inch maybe. That is a very thin screen. And just considering that the entire computer is in this thin little encasing is pretty fascinating. Says it's less than 10 pounds, and we're just kind of moving through some of the other aspects of what's going on here. They did, they've got the 1080 FaceTime camera built in, studio quality mics and speakers. And again, I'm not going to go through every little feature that they've got here, but again, this M3 is the biggest change. They're saying that it's 2 times faster than the M1 and up to 4 times faster than some of the old Intel models of the iMac. And so if you're looking for a desktop computer, this is a very nice option because again, everything's included all in one. There's all the it's a screen, it's a desktop. Of course, the biggest downfall is because it's a desktop, it's not portable, so you couldn't take it with you. You couldn't fold it up, put it in your backpack, and go work from a coffee shop. No, this is designed to stay obviously at home. I mean, I guess you could try that. I guess you could try and plug it in with the power. I've seen crazier things, I suppose, but anyway. So yeah, this is that new iMac. and it enters their line or an update there to their line with the Mac Mini and the Mac Studio. And of course, this is the only desktop that Apple makes that does have an all-in-one, and that it features the display as well. For a while there, the iMac line was quite expansive. They had a 21-inch version, I believe a 27-inch version. They had a Pro version. Now they've simplified it down to the iMac, and the iMac is kind of their most basic. Well, I guess the Mac Mini as well. They're kind of your most basic options, but the iMac, again, is designed to just be everything. And of course, there's the Mac Mini, which we've done full episodes on the Mac Mini and the Mac Studio in the past. But obviously, the big thing about the Mac Mini or the Mac Studio is that you would also need to get an external display. And it doesn't have to be an Apple one, though Apple does make an external display. They make their Studio display now, which I believe is a 27-inch. And they've also got the very high-end XDR monitors, which you probably don't want to even think about paying for. But you don't have to get a Apple made display for these Mac Mini or Mac Studio. You can just buy a third-party display, and it works there. But anyways, all that to say, the iMac is now available, or the refreshed iMac available with that M3, and the price does start at $12.99, which really, again, if you're wanting an Apple computer, and you want the screen, you want the keyboard, you want the mouse, you want it just to come in the box ready to go, this is a really good option. The iMac is well, I guess, well, no, the iMac is this version of it is the only computer in Apple's lineup that I've never actually used. I've used Mac Minis, I've used Mac Studios before. Like I said, I've seen these out and about, but I've never actually, used one and really gotten to know one very well. But again, it's going to work rather just as any other Mac model. So yeah, there is that iMac. Now, the other significant upgrade was the MacBook Pro, and I am really excited about this one because it is not. Okay, actually, let me back it up. Let me say the biggest kind of, I guess, drawback to this is that I feel like they're updating rather this MacBook Pro it feels like every 2 months, and that's an exaggeration. But if my memory serves me correctly, they did upgrade the MacBook Pro around this time last year, and that was an upgrade to something that they had upgraded maybe less than a year before. So to do it every year upgrade on these MacBook Pros feels a little much, just because this is a very big investment for somebody, because they have worked on the price point. We'll talk about that here in a minute, but especially if you're wanting one of the higher end ones, these are not cheap. And I'll be honest, I was one of the first to jump on this version of the MacBook Pro, and then I got what was the M1 Max version, and this now would have been well, how long ago was that? That was, I believe, almost 2 years ago at this point. And obviously, I have no desire to upgrade because it is a beast of a machine. It's the M1 Max. It's very good. But just the fact that, they continue to update them so often, it's like, well, what are you gaining from this? Because a professional, if you will, and I guess I would consider myself to be one, who's going to buy one of these, we're not going to upgrade to these every year. We're not going to go spend the thousands of dollars every single year to upgrade. I'm sure there's certain people out there that will, but most aren't. And so all that said, we are looking at yet another upgrade, the third upgrade in I guess 2 or 3 years to the MacBook Pro line. And just to give you some context, the MacBook Pro used to be something that Apple was only refreshing every 18 to 24 months. So to upgrade it to refresh it every year does feel a little excessive. But we aren't going to go through everything once again here, because the biggest change is the M3. Now, again, the M3 in terms of the chip is no slouch. It is certainly a performance and speed upgrade across the board, whether it's the M3, M3 Pro, or M3 Max. It does support now, for the M3 Max in particular, it does support a higher level of RAM and memory. And so, for example, let's take a look here at the M3 Pro model, and let's just kind of build out one just for sake of understanding where we're at on it. So once again, this would be the 14-inch, kind of the base model starts at 2,000. And we do have the option now it starts with 18 gigs of unified memory, which is up from 16 that it started at, and you can upgrade it to 36, whereas you used to only be able to upgrade to 32 on that M2 Pro. Now, if you were to go with the M3 Max, this is pretty significant. now you can upgrade, or if you go to the highest end M3 Max, now you can upgrade to 128 gigs of RAM, which is crazy because the M1 Max only supported 64. The M2, I believe, supported 96. And so this will support a lot more RAM, a lot more memory again. So you could really make these things into a workhorse if you wanted. And so that is a big update in terms of performance. I will say that. As far as all the other bells and whistles in terms of what it does exactly, I mean, really not much. I mean, if we wanted to try to scan through it here, there's nothing really significant. I mean, there are some things like ray tracing and some other high-end things that it does. They always like to brag on what it does for gaming, and I'm like, well, I don't know. I'm not a gamer in terms of, and if I was, I would be using. I think I said this before. I'd be using a console, not a computer. But that's been Apple's thing. They have always tried to kind of make themselves more relevant in the gaming machine market because a lot of computer gamers out there, in fact, most of them, the ones that are like streaming their games on Twitch and all the places, those people are they are using custom built PCs, and so Apple is always tried to compete in this way. So, anyways, all that to say, I don't really care about that, but you can see now looking at this line of chips right here. This is nice, kind of side by side for those of you watching. You've got the M3, which can support up to 24 gigs of memory. And that is, I don't know if that's a change from the 2, because I believe the M2 also supported up to 24 gigs of memory, if I remember right. So that's not a change, but it is a little bit faster. Again, we're not going to talk all the tech specs. M3 will support up to 36, whereas M2 only did 32. M3 up to 128, whereas M2 only supported up to 96. And again, these are much faster across the board. So anyways, talking a little bit about that, that is the biggest change is of course the M3 chips. Now, beyond that, I do like this. Now in these M3 Pro or M3 Max versions of this MacBook Pro, you can get space black, and I love having that black color for a Mac. It's been a long time. I have the M3 or the M2 rather MacBook Air, 15-inch MacBook Air, and it comes in what they call like a midnight blue, but it honestly looks black, and that's what I like about it. But I really like this space black. That's the most tempting part about these is that color. I like that space black color. Now, if you notice, if you just get the M3 version of the Pro, you're only going to be getting the space gray available option if you care about those colors. But that is an update to the color options there on those. Now, this is to me the best part about this new MacBook Pro announcement, and that is that they have officially, drumroll please, Apple has finally discontinued what I have been calling now for years the fake MacBook Pro, which was the MacBook Pro that still had the touch bar. And I found so few people that were actually touch bar fans. For most people, they were like me and they found it just a waste and pointless. And it was like, why? It's probably one of Apple's biggest, like, I guess, design kind of flops. It was not received well. It's not that everybody hated it. It's just that nobody loved it. And the people that it mattered to, as far as what it replaced the function keys, the F1, F2, F3, it replaced that function key row. And I don't really care, but there are developers out there who really thrive off of those function keys. And so it was either one of those things you just didn't care, you didn't love it, or you absolutely hated it. And so all that to say, the touch bar finally is gone completely from the Apple lineup. And that fake MacBook Pro 13-inch is gone. And what I like to see now is that this, if you're going to get a MacBook Pro, there's really, it's just made it less confusing. Because it used to be, if you're going to get a MacBook, you could get the MacBook Air, which is their non-pro version, and MacBook Airs are fantastic. I have only good things to say about it. Or you could get the 14 or 16-inch version of the MacBook Pro and know you were getting not just a beefier computer, but also one that has more ports. That's the biggest thing. We did kind of skim over that because it's not new, but there are more ports on a MacBook Pro. Look, if we kind of flip through these images, I'm sure that'll show what ports are there. Yeah, so you'll see on one side they've got the MagSafe charging. They've got 2 Thunderbolt ports and a headphone jack. On the other side, they've got the SD card slot, another Thunderbolt port, and an HDMI port. Now, the 13-inch fake MacBook Pro only had the 2 Thunderbolt ports. And that was something that was like, okay, if you're going to be a pro, you kind of like having these additional, again, especially things like an HDMI and an SD slot. And so for them to finally get rid of that fake 13-inch MacBook Pro, it just creates more clarity in what you're getting. If you want a pro, if you want something that's more consumer and you don't care about the performance as much, and you don't care as much about the having those extra ports and things like that, then the Air is going to be great for you. And now if you want the Pro, you're getting the same body and that you're getting the exact same casing, but you're just picking it based on speed. So yes, they have an M3 chip, which technically isn't a Pro chip because it's not called Pro, but it's no slouch. So you can get that M3 chip. And the pricing now is going to start at much less, which again, we were kind of previewing that a little bit earlier. If we look here at the 14-inch Pro, if you just get it with the M3, it starts at $1,600. That is $400 less than if you were going to be getting the M3 Pro version, which before, if you wanted the 14-inch version of the MacBook, you would have to get the $2,000 or higher price range. You'd have to go into that range. Now the 16-inch is only available in M3 Pro, and that makes sense. Because hey, the bigger it goes, the more kind of power it needs and things like that. But all this to say, I'm really glad to see they finally got rid of the fake MacBook Pro, and they've brought clarity, because again, it used to be like, oh, I want a MacBook Air or a MacBook Pro. Well, basically, if I was getting that 13-inch MacBook Pro, I was more or less getting a MacBook Air that had a fan in it. I mean, that was the difference. It wasn't as thin, and it had the same ports, and it was just confusing. It's even confusing to try to explain it. So this is a welcome change of providing clarity, because now you're either getting the Pro version as the Pro version of what Apple has to offer, or the Air. And what I think we'll see now moving forward, because the MacBook Air, as you can see, the MacBook Pro 14-inch and 16-inch, it's going to have the M3 line in it. The MacBook Air 13-inch and 15-inch start with the M2 version of it. Now, what I think we're probably going to see with Apple moving forward is that's how they're going to handle this. They're going to always bring the latest versions of the chips to the Pro. So the M3, M3 Pro, M3 Max, and the M4 and M5, and so on and so forth. And then the MacBook Air, probably, I would say within 3 to 6 months, I would say probably in the summer. That's what I would lean towards, probably sometime in June, maybe no later than early fall. Apple will announce MacBook Airs that have the M3 chip in them as well, but they're never going to, I doubt they're ever going to offer the M3, like the Pro version of the chip. It'll just be the basic version. And so all that to say, the Pro versions will always be, I would say, at least 6 months ahead in terms of the generation of the chip it's got. And obviously it's going to offer those ports and that higher performance always and all those things. So I do welcome this. I welcome this change. This is very good. So that's the new MacBook Pro, the new iMac that has come from Apple. And again, that was announced as of this past Monday, the October 30th. So if you're in the market for a new one, I believe both of the new Pro models are available. I believe you can order them now. And I think they start shipping in the next week or two, depending on what model you get. So new MacBook Pros through iMacs. So that's a cool thing to see there. Now, let's talk about which is going to be my new iPhone and iPad. And I'll use the time left in this episode to kind of go over that. So let's talk about my iPad first. Again, I talked about this in the last episode. I am the kind of guy, this is the world I live in, if you will, media, technology, it's what I do. And so, yes, I'm the kind of guy to upgrade my technology probably more often than the average person. I used to be the guy who, without fail, didn't matter, would get the new iPhone every year. I did this from the iPhone 5, let's think it, iPhone 5, iPhone 5S, iPhone 6, iPhone 6S, iPhone 7, and then, yes, the year the iPhone 10 came out, it was kind of confusing. They came out, I don't know if you remember this, but Apple came out with the iPhone 8 and the iPhone 10 in the same year. And there was never an iPhone 9. So that was interesting. But yeah, it came out. So I went with the 10 that year. And then from there, I can't exactly remember. I think maybe my next one was I actually did wait and go with the 11. And so then I started to just kind of put more space in between them, if you will. And so essentially what happened, long story short, is I went from the 13 line all the way to the 15. So a 2-year jump. And truth be known, without going into the story, I really would have gone from the 12 to the 15, but something happened to my iPhone 12 earlier on, and I was forced to upgrade because it kind of crapped out on me. All that to say, it is a significant upgrade in two ways. Now, this might seem, for those of you who are my loyal listeners out there, or watchers, or wherever you're consuming this content, you know that for the longest time, I guess since the iPhone 12 came out, I was using the mini version of the iPhone. So when the iPhone 12 and the iPhone 13s were announced, they both also had mini versions. There's the 12 mini and the 13 mini. I liked that because I did miss having kind of the smaller form factor. Another thing, where I was at is I was in a place where I really wanted to work on my screen time, in particular on my phone. I've talked many times in past episodes about how obviously we're all, and it doesn't matter what we do, how hard we try, we all have a little bit of addiction, if we're honest, to our screens and to our phones in particular. The stats on how many hours a day people are spending on their phone are pretty staggering. And in fact, it's hard to even know what's accurate anymore because it just seems to be ever expanding and growing. And so, ever since Apple started telling me how much time I'm spending on my phone, it just bothered me, and it was like, oh, that's a lot of time. And so I wanted to break my screen time, and I thought an effective way of doing that is going to be to downsize the actual physical size of my screen, because the smaller the screen, obviously the more you maybe have to strain a little bit to see things, and there's not as much real estate and room to work, if you will. And so I said, you know what? It was some of it was because I thought having a smaller form factor was kind of cool, but most of it was because I just wanted to take maybe a small step towards breaking my screen time. And so along with that, I stopped having my email apps on my phone. I don't have my social media apps on my phone. I just kind of moved away from all that to where my phone really primarily became for the purpose of using, listening to music, listening to podcasts, listening to audiobooks, obviously texting and things like that. And maybe doing some things like, obviously I have the Amazon app and things like that on the phone, and obviously, but then honestly using it as much as I could for the camera capabilities. The camera, it's always kind of, iPhone has, and some would argue with your Android people out there, but iPhone has at least to some extent led the way in a lot of like having a nice camera and things like that. And so all that to say, that's kind of what I was looking for, and to change the use of my phone and break my screen time addiction in the process. And so what I switched to was smaller screens all around, smaller phone and smaller iPad. So I went with the iPad mini. Now, I will say I still like the smaller form factor in concept. I like the iPad mini. I like that it fits in my back pocket. I really do like that. But what I started to find is, because I was in a place where and some of you out there are just, this is first world problems, I know. I was in a place though, where for a time there, I was a dual iPad guy and a small iPhone guy. That's what I had. I had the iPhone, I had the smallest iPhone, the smallest iPad, and I had the largest iPad. Now, I'm not going to go into my reasons of how all this unfolded and everything, but it wasn't what I necessarily planned, but it's how it all worked out. And so for a little while, I had the iPad mini and the iPad Pro 13-inch. Well, here's what I found. I had this vision of a world where I could use an iPad to the same degree I could my laptop or my computer. And while I did train myself to, and I've trained myself to do a lot of things on my iPad, I am just come to the conclusion that Apple is never, because I was also in the back of my mind hoping that maybe the iPad, Apple would enable it to do more. Because if you look at the latest iPad Pro, for example, I didn't have the latest version. I had the M1 version of the iPad Pro, but now they have that M2 chip in the iPad Pro. That's a very capable device hardware-wise. The limitation for me has always been software. iPad OS, it's becoming better and better, but it is not Mac OS, and that an iPad does not function the same way a Mac does. Now, they make it visually similar. There are similarities, but it is not the same. And I finally accepted and embraced that Apple's vision for the iPad and vision for the Mac, at least at this time and for the foreseeable future, are different, in that there was this rumor that maybe one day they were going to merge the two together. And I wouldn't doubt if they do actually move forward with that eventually, and to some degree. But it just came obvious to me that, look, I do like what my computer does. And as much as I wish my iPad could do some of that, it's never going to happen, and that's okay. And so what that led me to was realizing, okay, look, I've got this iPad mini. It's a smaller iPad. I like that. That became my main consumption device, as far as visual consumption. Like I said, the iPhone became my I guess a listening consumption device. And then, like I said, audiobooks, podcasts, music, that was my main thing. The iPad mini became my visual consumption device. So I rarely stream watching on an iPad. I usually just watch on my TV. But if I was going to, maybe I would do it there. Social media apps were on my iPad. Email was on my iPad. These things that, again, scrolling through social media mainly, I did that on my iPad mini. And then I had on my large iPad, the 13-inch, I tried to make that into a creation device. I try, but about and what I mean by creation device is actually be able to create content on that iPad. Maybe by trying out things like video editors. They have like a version of Final Cut for the iPad, which I tried. They have DaVinci Resolve for the iPad. They have iMovie for the iPad. And I experimented with it some, and I tried to maybe make it a creation device as much as I could. But the only thing I found that I was doing effectively on the iPad, on the larger version of the iPad, was writing. Like as in, if I needed to write something, I had the Magic Keyboard for it, which is really nice because it's got a mouse and trackpad built in, so that's really cool. So I was able to write content, and that was nice. But beyond that, so like I could write something up. I could type up, write up a few paragraphs about some content I wanted to put out. You maybe write a script. I could answer emails very effectively and manage my email inbox and so forth. And I can do high level task management. Viewing certain apps and like I've talked about ClickUp and Trello and things like that, and my to-do list and all these things. I could do all of that. But actually creating content in the way that I can on my Mac just wasn't happening. I can record audio on an iPad. I actually can record or input one of these high quality studio mics into my studio mics rather into my iPad, and I can capture the audio from that studio mic. But I can't really capture video effectively. I can use the built-in camera, but that's about it. And so to really have the iPad as a true professional content creative device for me was just not going to be a reality. And so I kind of shifted everything around, if you will. Now that I've broken the screen time on my phone, I say broken, drastically reduced. I can say that I've drastically reduced the screen time on my phone to where I said, you know what, I can change what I'm doing in terms of screen size here. The smaller screen size was helpful in doing that, but now I can change that. And this 13-inch iPad is not doing me any good. It's just not for me. And so it's just not, again, being what I want. It's too big if I just want a writing device. So all that to say, I took the iPad mini and I repurposed that. And really what I did is I shifted things out around the family members. Now the iPad mini, without going into detail, is used with limitations and very strict screen time guidance, is used to some degree by my daughter. And it's nice because I have a little cellular data on it to where I can see where she's at. It stays in her backpack. So when she's at school, I know where she's at. When she's, anywhere at her grandma's house or my house or wherever she's at, I could see where she is. And so that's really nice. And so that's kind of what I did there. And then I took my large iPad and I was able to offload that onto my sister. Shout out to my sister, Rebecca, if she's listening. But even if she's not, she is the voice that you hear on my podcast intro and outro. And so that's Rebecca. And Rebecca is very much the kind of person who, and it's a generational thing. She's technically, I'm a millennial. She's technically Gen Z. She's grown up on iPad and iOS. She knows that better than Mac OS. So she's a very effective creator on an iPad. So for her to have a larger canvas iPad, she was on an 11-inch iPad. She was using an 11-inch iPad and a 13-inch MacBook Air. For her, it made a lot more sense just to go to that 13-inch iPad Pro. And now she's got that with the Magic Keyboard. And now she has everything she needs to do a lot of what she needs to do in her world. And so I think that people like that, there is a market for it. That's for sure. Because again, there are people who just know can work circles around me on an iPad. And that's definitely where my sister was at. So she took that one. That left me without an iPad. And so I thought, you know what, let's go back to the best of both worlds, which of course is the 11-inch model. And so I got the 11-inch iPad Air. Now I like this one because once again, if you're watching, you can see a little bit. I've got it with the Magic Keyboard attached that I can attach and detach. Some people don't like this keyboard because it doesn't fold all the way back. So if you want to truly use it as a tablet, you have to take it off, but that doesn't bother me. I actually kind of like it because that way, when I want to be in tablet mode, it's a little bit leaner and lighter. So I like that. But it connects to this keyboard. I've got the pencil. I don't use the pencil that often. I'm not super artistic, but I do like having it for times when there is times when I do use the pencil, and it folds up, and it becomes effectively, in terms of form factor and purpose, a mini laptop with limited purpose. So it's fantastic for writing. I love writing on this. I can write for hours on this if I want, and I don't feel like I'm cramped or that I'm limited or anything like that. In fact, it makes me feel more focused because it's a smaller screen. It's a smaller screen, but not a tiny screen. The iPad mini is a tiny screen. This is just a smaller screen, smaller than my 14-inch or 15-inch computer. And so it's a smaller screen, allows me to kind of focus more. And that is what I like about the iPad. You can run 2 apps at once, but that's it. You can't have all these windows and different things distracting you. So if I want to write, I can write. If I want to manage and plow through my email inbox, I can do that very effectively. So I have enjoyed this. I've had it for about a month now, and I've had this size before. In fact, I had a version of this exact iPad Air before. I believe I had the 4th generation. This one's the 5th one. The biggest difference is this has the M1 chip. So, again, it's got it's very fast, and performance wise, it's great. So iPad Air. Now, I also have the iPhone 15 Pro Max. So this is a huge change in terms of form factor. This is a massive device. I don't have I traded it in, so I don't have the old one, the mini version, to compare it to, but it is a big change. And honestly, that was my biggest concern, is this going to be too big compared to what I had in terms of carrying it around, holding it, having it in my pocket. And I don't know if I'm a full month. I'm probably about 3 weeks in on having this one. And right now, I think I'm at a place where I can sufficiently say that the adjustment has really not been all that bad. So I am glad that I got this over, because it is nice. Maybe it's just because I'm getting old. It is easier on the eyes, the larger screen. But once again, I also was able to, because I was using that small screen for a couple of years, I was effectively able to I more or less not completely break, but minimize my screen time. And so I'm following the same practices on this phone. No social media, no email apps, nothing like that. I'm not managing my email from here. Again, not scrolling social media from here. And in fact, I've been very conscious. There's sometimes where I'll download apps. I'm like, this one's a little too time consuming, so I'll offload it and maybe just use it on my iPad. And so this approach has worked very effective for me so far, of having an iPhone that is larger, much larger. And again, but it really, and I have larger hands. I'm 6'5", like I'm not a small person. And so it's not like it's been like, oh my gosh, this thing's so huge and I can operate it for the most part with one hand. And so this, and then going with the upsizing my iPad from the mini to the 11-inch has been a very, so far, no major adjustments. In fact, I think it makes things a little more streamlined and efficient for where I'm at. And so all that to say, in 2 years, I'll probably be telling you how I downgraded or downsized back to the mini and back to the mini phone and the mini iPad and whatever, who knows. But I'm always, changing and upgrading, and that's what I do. But this is working well for me now. And I will say this, the greatest, most fascinating, wonderful thing about this phone is the camera. The camera is absolutely fantastic. I think I did show a sample of it in the last episode, of some footage I took at my other sister's wedding. That was my sister, Rachel. That footage was gorgeous. And we compared it to footage shot on the very camera that you're looking at. There was another videographer there taking footage. It was Bo, our producer of this podcast. He was taking footage on this actual camera, the one that you're looking at. And we side by side compared it, and there's really no difference. In fact, there were times where the iPhone took better footage. And so that is something I am not regretting, because that was my other reason in upgrading, was so that I could also, moving forward, if I needed to be mobile, and I don't as often anymore, if I needed to be mobile with my camera, I would just have what I need in my pocket, and I would accessorize it a little bit. I will show you this quickly. Is, for those of you watching, I'm looking into accessories like this. For those of you who can't see, this is a a iPhone mount that is a camera mount that is designed to work with MagSafe iPhones. So I can mount my iPhone right there, and I've got this nice camera cage, which just helps to get a nice, more steady shot. I can also there's slots on the top of and bottom for shoe mounts. So that means I can actually mount like a microphone here or even a little light right up here. And I can really have this nice rig. I've experimented with this some. I've actually hopefully got a video shoot. It looks like potentially coming up here in a few weeks. And I plan on also taking this to be a second camera. And I'm really looking forward to utilizing features like this. And the other nice thing is because it's the biggest thing about the whole line of iPhone 15 is USB-C instead of Lightning. Now, some of you are going to complain because you only got to buy all new ports. Well, everything else is using USB-C. Obviously, the Mac has been for a while. The iPad has been for a couple of years, at least at this point. So it was about time they brought this to the iPhone. And what's nice is that what I can do now is I can even plug microphones even more directly into that. So I've got the wireless Rode Wireless Go system that has a receiver that plugs in by USB-C. Well, now I can plug it directly into the phone, and I can have those wireless mics capture the audio directly in camera on the iPhone, and that is awesome. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to utilizing this more in that department. And so instead of maybe one day upgrading my camera, I really am just imagining a world where maybe I can accessorize my phone instead of going and buying an all new camera and new lenses and things like that. So that's where I'm at on the devices. So a little bit of a longer episode there. Again, the Mac update part wasn't expected because that is something that has changed since we last talked. That's a development that Apple had that event, and so new Macs, new Mac Mini, new Mac Pros, and just letting you know. Hey, if you're in the market for a new iPhone and you really care about the camera, the iPhone 15 Pro Max rather is a significantly fantastic camera. Even just the Pro model, there's some small discrepancies. Mainly the zoom lens only goes, I think, to 3 times on the iPhone Pro, whereas the Pro Max goes to 5. So there are some differences there. And there's so much more. I'm not even talking about all the things that the camera can do. I really just scraped the surface. But if you're looking for a new phone, the iPhone 15 Pro seems to be a good one, the Pro or the Pro Max. I know people that got the Pro and the Pro Plus, and they're happy with it. And then the iPad Air, if you're looking for a nice mid-size iPad, I do like the 11-inch iPad Air. They may be refreshing that in the next 6 months. I was going to hold out, but I thought they were going to refresh it this fall, but they didn't. So I went ahead and got it, and I'm very happy with it. So yeah, that is where we're at, and that concludes this episode. And if you have thoughts, as always, I'd love to hear from you. You can drop comments on YouTube, or you can always shoot me an email or shoot me a text. And I am just really grateful that you joined me for this episode, and I do look forward to seeing you in the next one. Again, my name's Luke Clayton, and thanks for joining me for the Must Increase podcast.
We are so glad you joined us for this episode. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Apple Podcast, Spotify, and wherever you may listen to podcasts. Also, we'd really appreciate it if you could leave us a 5-star review and share this podcast with your friends. You can connect with us online at mustincrease.com, and if you'd like a topic or question to be featured on a future episode, send us a text to 615-900-4461. Thanks again for joining us for this episode, and we look forward to seeing you next time as we continue to increase truth and inspire hope in the lives of others right here on the Must Increase podcast.